right before I leave to go to prison, my grandma asks me, Sean, will you replant the old front orchard?
Hello, my name is Ria Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
Bringing us into this here episode 367, you were hearing from Sean McFarland talking about his grandmother asking him to plant the orchard at the family farm out in Minnesota right before he went into prison. He went into prison for being a fantastic cannabis grower by all accounts out in California. Did his time, and right before going into prison, he got this like destiny moment with grandma, and you're going to hear it all. But through his time in prison, he began to study cider, apples, and cider making, and now has a cidery in Minnesota. It's just a really uplifting story, and he is an uplifting man, charismatic and really optimistic. So buckle in, make sure you have a cider for that feature. We'll be rolling to that shortly, but first, a wee bit of news from out and about in Ciderville. There are a lot of different places that you could find Cider Chat, the podcast episodes that go rolling out each and every week for, well, we are now in season 8, so that's many years already in our pocket. And one of the places that it does roll out is YouTube. So Cider Chat does have a YouTube channel besides having the main website page, ciderchat.com. And at YouTube, you can listen to the podcast. There's typically just a static photo there. Just put it on the background, because I know a lot of people don't really necessarily go to Apple Podcasts or Google Play or Spotify. So you could check it out there. But in addition to the static photo and the podcast episode, there's also a number of videos where sometimes if there's a presenter, such as recently with Richie Brady talking about the language of cider or a systematic approach to the language of cider, in that case, his audio is synced with his PowerPoint presentation. So that's a little bit what goes on there. And then from time to time, you could find, if you go to, you Google on YouTube, Cider Chat, you'll find a menu bar and you'll see all the podcast episodes. There's also a short. Shorts are like little mini clips, kind of like TikTok, but for YouTube. I have a number of little shorts there. Some are unboxing, some are of me out pruning my little apple tree, little musings. And there's also a live tab, and there you can see the live feed from the Chicago Cider Summit. Did 2 sessions there with some amazing co-hosts and also cider makers. And that is also where you could see bottles on my desk. Eventually, it'll probably have its own tag, like a playlist for bottles on my desk. And this is where I am talking about a bottle on my desk, because I have a lot of them. Not that I really, support day drinking, but I have a lot of different products that come my way, and this is a nice way to be able to talk about it and share that with you. So recently, just last week, posted one from Heartland Cider Works out in Oregon, tasting the cider called Avalon. So if you want to check that out, it's like a little 4-minute video, you can. And I'm going to have some others going up this week too. Well, at least once probably per week. And a great thing to do is to subscribe to that YouTube channel, because it's a fantastic way to keep cider in the loop, right? The magical algorithm of the internet. Every time you subscribe to anything that has to do with cider, and hopefully you are subscribed fully to Cider Chat and all the different channels, it helps. It helps a lot. It's one way to help keep cider going up. And I imagine if you listen this far, you're in on it and just really love the world of apples and trees and cider and all the people involved. So do check it out. There'll be links in the show notes to the Cider Chat YouTube channel, but it's super easy to just do on a little search on your phone or desktop and find it at YouTube.
Walking through the orchards.
Over in Japan, there's a lot going on for cider, and you could find all the newest news about that beautiful region of the world by subscribing to Insider Japan. And they just came out with issue number 16, and you're going to find out that there's a new cider bar in Western Tokyo. There's also another new cidery called OK Adam. It's in the Akita Prefecture, which is, a region in Japan. And you're going to see what happened during the Japan Cider Cup and all the winners there, which gives you a fantastic overview of all these cider makers, or perhaps I should call them cideries, in different parts of the world that you don't normally hear about, such as South Korea, right? There's cider in South Korea. It's been happening for a while. It might not be your typical orchard-based cider, or maybe it is. You won't know until you check it out. So do go to Insider Japan. Insider Japan, which is founded and run by Lee Reeve, has been a big supporter of Cider Chat for quite a while. And I'm always impressed that they're able to get this news out. It's all online at this point. It used to be a hard copy, but now it has gone fully online, which is super easy. I just open it up on my phone and start reading away. Really, really great move on Lee's part. So again, it's called Insider. That's all one word, Japan. The only bilingual English to Japanese magazine out there covering everything happening in the country of Japan. Cool stuff.
Dancing in the streets.
Cider Chat is listener supported, and we have the following commercial operations that help this podcast stay on the air and keep cider going up. Out in Ohio, there is Bent Ladder Cider and Wine. That's based in Doylestown, Ohio. Press Then Press is an online retailer based out in Seattle and ships throughout the U.S., giving you a fantastic collection of all different kinds of ciders. Esoterra Cider Works is in Dolores, Colorado, and that's out in the Four Corners region of the U.S. Always doing fantastic different events there that you want to check out, especially as you are designing your summer road trips. Spacetime Mead and Cider Works is in Dunmore, Pennsylvania. That's right next to Scranton, so it's really considered Eastern Pennsylvania. Taddy Bogle Cider Works is in Western Pennsylvania in Acme, and that is just south, right outside of Pittsburgh. And they're building a huge pavilion right now. They got some cool stuff going on there. And along with their modern ciders, they always have like little special batch ciders. So do check it out. Ask for Kurt Henry. Tell them Cider Chat sent you. There's over on the other side of the world, we'd say across the puddle, right, in England, there is Ross Cider and Perry Company. That is in Ross-on-Wye in Herefordshire region, right? So that is West Country of England. The Johnson family there, always putting on amazing events. The next big event coming up will be over our holiday weekend here in the U.S. called Labor Day weekend. The Ross Cider Fest has been going on for 20 plus years. Just a fantastic 3-day event. And Duck Chicken is in South London, and they have cider and perry. They have a dry perry in a can. So look for them when you are in London at all your favorite little stops and ask for them. Duck Chicken. This is just a wonderful compilation of makers and commercial operations helping support Cider Chat. And you too can do that too if you're getting value from this podcast. Just Google Cider Chat and Patreon. That's spelled Patreon.
Smelling all the blossoms.
That little musical transition is being sung by myself and my cousin Jay. I actually have written 2 cider songs. One is We Like Cider, and the other one is Strange Apples. And those can both be found at the Cider Chat YouTube channel, a playlist. There's a playlist for cider songs, and Well, maybe I'll be writing some more. So Jay's going to be coming out to my special spot in Ciderville coming up soon here in this month. And at the end of this month, I'm going to be dialing back a little bit and going out every other week, a release for Cider Chat, for a lot of reasons I'm not going to get into right now. But the main one is that I have a ton of family coming out at the end of this here month, and hosting all of them and managing that. So I need a little bit of spaciousness to enjoy that time. I'm sure you all understand. I want to just keep on referring you to that YouTube channel because I will be rolling out bottles on my desk. So if you're kind of jonesing for a little bit of Cider Chat and like, oh, where is it this week? Don't worry. There's probably something at YouTube or an episode out of the 360 and 70 and counting that maybe would be good to go back to and check out. So just a heads up to all the supporters and subscribers and folks. Don't worry, Cider Chat's not going away. Just it's summertime and there's a lot going on. And I hope that's true for you in all the best ways possible. Up next is our featured conversation with Sean McFarland.
Kicking up our feet.
Earlier this year, while attending CiderCon in Chicago, I was approached by Sean McFarland, who said, I have a story for you to share on Cider Chat. And of course, I was all ears. And that's what we're going to be rolling to next. It is a story of optimism and hope and how, even in the darkest times, cider can save. So grab a glass and join this chat with Sean McFarland of Blackshire Cider, based in Minnesota.
I grew up a military brat, but the grandchild of some farmers. So I grew up around cider making, corn and bean growing, and then also grew up in the big city. I went to school for horticulture, and while I was going to school for horticulture, I started a commercial squash farm and was reasonably successful with that, and moved out to California and began growing medical cannabis. It was fun. It was exciting. I've got Crohn's disease, and I find that cannabis alleviates my symptoms. And I really felt like I was doing something pretty awesome. I did know that I was a bit of an outlaw, even as I was following the state guidelines. It is federally illegal everywhere in the United States. Every state that has quote unquote legal weed, it's federally illegal. And at any moment, should you gain the interest of the federal government, they can do whatever they want. Any legal protections you thought you had with a license, poof, they're gone. So,
even in 2023. So, I mean, there's a lot of states that have legalized both medical marijuana and recreational, but it's still illegal in the federal eyes, is what you're referring to.
Yes, the federal government has the drug scheduled, as a class 1, a Schedule 1 drug. Mm-hmm. And that is parallel with heroin and LSD. Schedule 2, which allows for some medicinal use, is methamphetamine and coke and hydrocodone. Schedule 3, and we can go down from there. But Schedule 1 allows for no medicinal use. It's very hard to research, and it's been scheduled that way since the 1970s. We could talk about that, but we won't. And it is entirely illegal in these United States. So I was growing marijuana in California. We could drive down the highway with a truck full of plants and wave at the highway patrolmen, and they'd wave back at you. We would pull over at the side of the road. We'd see our friends with a barrel of processed marijuana in the back of their truck. And this really happened. Pulled the barrel out of the truck on the side of the road, like a mountain road, like a paved mountain road. Mm-hmm. The barrel's open. He's showing me his product. I'm like, that's really great. Meanwhile, our little old lady neighbor drives by and she's like, hello, boys. Just to set the environment of how normal and real it just felt like it should be a good thing.
Now, this was in California. Like, what year?
Correct.
What year are we talking about here?
This story I'm telling you is from 2010.
Okay.
It was probably about 2010 that I remember being pulled over on the side of the road. And, it was that out in the open. Storefronts, I'm paying taxes. There's not a checkbox for marijuana, so I filled it out as cut flowers. I sold cut flowers. But I made an above board income, paid taxes, and was not hiding what I was doing.
Who were you selling to? Who were your customers?
Primarily, I sold to a broker who distributed to dispensaries in Southern California. I was up in Northern California where the culture was very permissible, and the actual county laws it was just easier to do up there than say in Southern California, and the climate was just perfect.
Did you go to California specifically for growing weed, or were you just?
I did.
Oh, okay. All right. You didn't just want to see the ocean. You wanted to grow weed.
So I was in college in South Dakota, where I had my squash business. It's where I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. It's when I realized that I experienced some pretty amazing symptomatic relief, and I just became passionate about the drug. But I live in a state where it's completely outlaw, and I find out that if I travel across the country, there's a place where everybody's just practically handing it out for free. I remember the first time I visited, somebody sat a quart jar of buds in front of me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, thanks. How much do you want for this?" And he's like, "Just take as much as you want while you're here. It doesn't matter." It's when I started realizing that it's just a plant, and if we could just grow it, it's not really worth anything. It is worth something to some people sometimes. But it is the illegal nature of it that makes it worth something.
How did the pot or the cannabis work for your Crohn's disease? Is there any scientific research on that? Or
indeed, there is. It's very similar to how it works for people with MS, especially the CBD, but also in conjunction with some of the other psychotropic chemicals in the marijuana. It reduces seizures and spasms significantly. There's all sorts of research on all sorts of other things that people find relief from. But I could smoke a tiny bit, a very small amount, especially of something of a high CBD content, like the sativa varieties. And within 30 seconds, I could feel my stomach. I still use it. I could feel my stomach though just relax. And so often I would smoke, and 30 seconds later I could think of nothing more profound to say than magic, because it was that immediate, it was that drastic, and it was more effective symptomatically than anything that a doctor had given me.
Well, obviously, the medicinal properties of cannabis are really important, but you took this major left turn in your journey. So let's roll back to that. So here you are in California. You're growing weed, 2 dispensaries.
I'm kind of ambitious, so I'm growing a lot of it.
What do we mean by a lot?
I had 3 greenhouses. I'm not saying I was the biggest grower that ever did exist, but thousands of plants.
And was this on land that you rented, or was it on?
No,
you owned it.
I first took my squash making money and squash growing money and bought a farm with a friend, and then he bought me out, and then I went and bought my own farm. Kind of a journey of business as they go.
Got it. Because cannabis has a kind of a bad rap in Northern California for being rather destructive to the environment, a lot of the growers. So that's why I asked you if you were working out of your own setting versus, where folks are hiding out on the hillside somewhere. Did you have to hide out your greenhouses at that point, or was it totally open to the law enforcement?
Local law enforcement, totally open. The federal government was still funding a organization called CAMP, and they flew helicopters around.
Yeah.
And one of the main purposes of the greenhouses, there's two, but one of the main purposes of the greenhouses is to provide an opaque shade from the federal law enforcement that would be flying overhead. If they can't see it, they don't have a reason to.
Right.
They don't have a reason to stop. Again, I knew that I was being a rebel. It was not lost on me. I just didn't think I was being that big of a rebel.
When it's part of your lifestyle, it's hard to realize that other people don't see it that way. So we're starting in 2010 up to 2017. Are we looking at?
No, it would have been about 2008 up to 2012, maybe 2007 to 12. Maybe it's only 5 years.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right.
Sometimes our stories get bigger.
How big was that fish?
More times we tell them. Oh man, you're talking to a fisherman here.
All right.
It was big.
Well, I know this is big. This is a huge story. So life was going well. You're making a good living. What happened? What happened in that journey?
In one of these extra legal sales that I made, the sale itself was legal, but I knew that the person I was selling to was not always making legal sales. He took it back to South Dakota, and he got caught. He bought 10 pounds from me, and he got caught with 70. And the way the federal government works is they have this law called conspiracy. It basically is the idea of breaking a law. What they were able to do was interrogate this person and ask him how much weed he ever saw, sold, wished he had, was ever a part of. And they came up with this number on paper that was 1,600 pounds. I grew much more than 1,600 pounds in my life. But all that pot was gone. And the only pot that I actually sold to this guy was 10 pounds. And even the pot that they found on him was 70 pounds. But they came up with a conspiracy for 1,600 pounds.
He called you out in this interrogation, it sounds like. So is that like a knock on the door, or is that like the SWAT team comes descending upon you?
Middle of the summer, I get a phone call from my neighbor. We'll call him Bob. What's up, Bob? He says, nothing good. I'm like, oh, man. Okay, what's up? A dozen unmarked vehicles just rolled past my house. Immediately, I grab me and my employees, and we hop on a four-wheeler and in an SUV and barrel down this old logging road deep into the forest. Hop out of our vehicles. We're in pajamas.
You're on the run. You're on the run.
On the run.
Oh my God.
So we get down to the logging road, the bottom of the logging road. The road runs out. We can't take that anymore. And so we're going to just stick ourselves in the woods. And then I look in the car, and unfortunately the car is a brand new car. Never bought a brand new car in my life, but I bought one a week before I got arrested. And so there's nothing in it. There was one cigarette, one beer, and 2 towels from the beach. We grab it and then we sink ourselves into the woods. We hid down this hill next to a waterfall that's kind of like nestled into this little spot. So we sat there for, I don't know, like an hour or two, and nothing's happening. And I don't have cell phone service, so I decide I'm going to hike back up and see if I can get cell phone service. So I get it, and I'm texting with my friends. Does anybody know what's going on? Nope. They still haven't come back down the hill. There's only one way in and one way out. Okay, so I hike back down. And a couple more hours, same thing. Anybody know what's going on? No. Hike back down. Couple more hours. We're cold. It's raining. We've got 2 towels.
It's interesting because you know what they say about criminals. Not that you're considered a criminal in the U.S. system.
Sure.
But, like thinking it through that you're doing something illegal here and not doing a prepper thing almost to say, I need to have a jump bag.
It's called a go bag.
A go bag. Okay, there you go.
Go bag. I had no go bag.
You had no go bag.
Sandals, pajamas, and I got a towel wrapped around me. We're cold too. There's 3 of us. We shared the beer. We shared the cigarette. We're all 3 snuggled. We're like all 3 of us are spooned up next to each other. And so, okay, it's getting on in the day. It's like 4:00. There's still no word. I know my property pretty well. I'm going to hike up, and I'm going to try and sneak upon my property. So I hike all the way up. It's like probably a mile uphill in the woods. I said the greenhouses have 2 purposes. One was to block out view. The other is they hold tarps for light deprivation. It's a technique to make plants flower earlier. Okay. I've got the tarps pulled over my greenhouses, and I see them, and they're still there. And I said to myself, okay, everything's okay, because the tarps are still there. They would have had to take off the tarps if they were going to do something like seize the marijuana. Assuming these people are even the cops, they don't even know for sure.
Oh my God.
So all of a sudden I start standing up straighter and walking less quietly, and I'm breathing, and then I get closer to my greenhouses, and I see that they have just cut holes in the tarps, not pulled the tarps off, and that for sure my greenhouses have been raided. Right at this moment, my dogs come running up to me, barking, ruff, 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 ruff. And then from the top of the hill where my house is, I hear a door shut, a car door, chug. And then more, chug, 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 vroom. And I'm like, oh man, they're coming.
Yeah.
So I full speed run downhill through the woods, jumping over logs with sticks sticking at me that I could have impaled myself on.
Yeah.
You know the feeling of running downhill
for your life.
Now add deathly obstacles along the way. So I'm running, and I run downhill a mile, and I make it to our spot, and they didn't catch us, and the dogs are with us, and then I'm holding them, keeping them quiet. And then we wait another 2 hours, and nothing happens. They were gone. My friends were up at my place looking for me. They said they were actually leaving when I heard the doors shutting, not coming after me.
Oh, they were leaving. Oh my goodness! Wow.
They were leaving.
Wow.
We gathered our stuff, and I went to town to try and find a lawyer, and I made the mistake of spending the night at my sister's house. And the very next morning, 17 Homeland Security agents armed with AR-16s, AR-15s, yes, surround the house, knock on the window where I'm sleeping. There's like 5 guns pointed at me, and they're screaming and yelling to get out of the house. Open up the door, and they throw me on the ground like I'm a dangerous guy, and hog tie me and handcuff me and bring me in. Ask me if I want to cooperate. They've got a deal for me. I said, what's the deal? He said, well, there's not really a deal, but a judge is going to look at Sean and ask him how he acted when he was in between a rock and a hard place. And that was the wrong words to use on me, because it's what my dad would always say when a man had to make a hard choice between doing the right thing and doing something else. And so I laughed at him, and then they booked me. Boom. In jail.
Have you gotten an attorney at this point? Because you went into town.
Oh, no. I went in that night.
Okay, no
slept
attorney.
At my sister's house, and at 7 a.m. in the morning is when they raided her house.
Yeah. Looking back now, because I know that you've had plenty of time to reflect.
Sure.
What would you have done differently as a grower? Because it seems like you're rather cavalier in it all, and not really pulling in the immensity of the situation, even to the point where they had raided your home, shook it upside down, and then you went into town. Looking back, what would you tell Sean looking back?
After getting raided, I got sufficiently drunk. And so the choice...
You're an outlier.
To catch it, I mean, it was a pretty stressful day.
Totally, I'm sure.
Looking back, would it have been better to have gotten somebody to rent me a hotel in their name? Sure. Would it have changed my legal outcome any? No. I can look back and say that's stupid. Everyone was cavalier because it was just, everything was wide. It was wide open.
Right.
You know, like if you asked somebody for a little bit of weed, they didn't go and put it in a baggie. 9 times out of 10, they'd grab it with their hands and hand it to you like you'd hand somebody a tomato. And you stuff it in your pockets, and if half of it fell out, it didn't matter. I mean, everything was cavalier. If I can say that I stand by my morals when it comes to the actual growing of marijuana, well, I wouldn't change that. But if you like who you are today, how can you want to take back anything, even the bad things that happened in the past. Could I have made some better choices? Yes.
So you got busted. You were sent to federal corrections. Is that true? Like what's the step there? Because we're slowly moving on to a journey that took you on a different direction from growing weed.
Basically, I get arraigned in county jail. I get a fantastic attorney that takes my case pro bono. His name is Tony Serra. He is legendary. He is a drug rights advocate, and he showed up with one of his apprentices to jail, and I'm like bawling. I've never been in trouble for like pretty much anything other than a speeding ticket, and this is several weeks later after many jail-related traumas. And he gets me out on bail, and pretty much the first thing he sits me down and says, "Okay, so you're going to prison." I'm like, wait. OJ can get off. Like, there's a chance I'm not going to prison, right? And he's like, no. It's federal conspiracy. You're going to prison. If they say you did it, you did it. There's no way for you to prove that what they're saying is a lie. You're going to prison. So I get ready to go to prison. It takes about 2 years. There's like about 2 years of like motions and figuring out, when I'm going to turn myself in. They gave me time for some dental work from getting a tooth bashed out while I was in jail, while I was in transport.
Oh my gosh.
The whole thing, man. I tell you.
Wow.
We could just talk about just that part for like an hour, but we'll move. Right before I get ready to go to prison, my family says that I can move into the family acreage when I come back. It's about 10 acres. And it gives me something to like start thinking about, like, okay, what's next chapter going to look like? It was really healthy for me, to have something like that. A lot of people in prison have nothing. They've got no family, no support. All my family is behind me. Even my family, who, if you'd asked them before I got arrested if marijuana should be legal or not, they'd have said no. When they realized that marijuana being illegal makes real good people that have done fairly innocent things go to prison for real amounts of time, all of a sudden their minds are like, wait a second, this actually means something. So I go to prison. I go to federal prison in Leavenworth, Kansas. Right before I left, I was thinking I might grow grapes and make wine. I'm thinking I have to make some kind of value-added product. I've only got 10 acres. I'm not going to grow hundreds of acres, thousands of acres of corn and soybeans. I need to make a value-added product. So I'm wrapping my head around wine. But Minnesota grows, the grapes that will survive up here are less than amazing as far as their winemaking quality. But this is the path I'm like starting to set myself on. Right before I leave to go to prison, my grandma asks me, "Sean, will you replant the old front orchard?" It had been cut down, 30 years ago. And I thought to myself, yeah, of course, Grandma, I will replant the front orchard. I don't exactly know what I'm going to do with a half an acre of apple trees, which at the time seemed like more trees than, you could do anything with personally. But I'm going to do it. And then so I thought about it. Well, if I'm already making wine, I should make cider. At this time, I know almost nothing about traditional craft cider. Everything I know is in the form of commercial ciders that shall not be named, that make a watered down, sweet, artificially flavored product. And I didn't even know that about it. So I'm in prison and I have somebody send me a book. I said, "Would you send me a book on cider making? Find a book on cider making." And they sent me Everything Hard Cider book. And in it was like 5 pages on the history of cider, which I found really interesting, that it was the main beverage of America before Prohibition, which we could draw some lines to here, but so and that federal agents cut down apple trees, get out of town. And
here's your story.
I'm all of a sudden becoming I'm like drawn to this all of a sudden. And then I learn about traditional cider varieties, about the chemical and sugar composition of true cider fruit. And I've been making wine for like 20 years. So I I'm intimate with the process. I understand what makes a wine grape different than a table grape. And when I realized that a dessert apple, layman's table apple, is going to be chemically different than a good piece of cider fruit.
Boom.
So then I'm thinking, okay, I wished I would have planted that little front orchard before I left for prison, but I didn't have time. I tried to get somebody to do it for me, and I'd have probably planted it full of Honeycrisp or something like that. But now I get to start digging in and looking at cider varieties. And that's when this book was like, I must have read this.
Oh,
I must have read it 100 times.
The new Cider Maker's Handbook, Sean is holding that up right now from Claude Jacquelin.
Yes. And he spends a good portion of the book just talking about cider varieties, which is like, I don't have any information on this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have Google. I don't have anything. I'm going in the backs of these books and looking at their references. And so I'm coming up with lists of reference books, and I'm sending those to people on the outside. Can you find these? A lot of them are like random books from the 1800s. No, they can't get them. But I start getting more and more cider books sent to me in prison. And then I'll have questions like, can you Google an answer for something? And it's literally this painstaking. I call up my sister-in-law, and she's got to Google me something and then send me the search results. And then after I've chosen which search results I want her to look at, she'll open up the search results, print those off, and send those to me.
I'm getting a sense in many ways that this became your main focus while you're in prison. Like cider kind of like was the salvation of making it through those 3 years. I can't even imagine what it's like to be in that type of setting, 24/7. At that time, when we had met before, you said that your family was a really integral part of this, and obviously they were sending you books and whatnot. If somebody is listening to this podcast now who maybe has a family member or is looking at that 2-year lay period of waiting to get in, and not waiting, but, expecting to get put into prison, the stress alone, I can't even imagine what that's like. What would be some of your advice to them in that situation, to family members or just to the person facing that same predicament?
It's hard for me to give advice on what somebody should or shouldn't do. But I think that the more understanding people might have about it, the better. One thing that I experienced while I was in was that a week for me would go by so slow. I'd be waiting for you to respond to an email. I'd be waiting for you to write me back. I'd be waiting for you to deposit a little bit of money so I could buy some ramens. I'd be waiting. And as we all know, life, if you've been in prison, you call this life on the outside. Life on the outside, real life, it goes by really fast. Last week is boom, it's gone. And so one of the biggest pieces of empathy that I could implore somebody to have for a family member or friend that's incarcerated is just the difference in how time feels, and how reliant we are on what somebody said that they were going to do and when they said that they were going to do it. If you told me you weren't going to talk to me for a month, cool, I can set that date out. If you told me you were going to put money in my account so I can make phone calls tomorrow, I'm ready.
You're waiting for
I'm ready.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a little bit like cider making, where you have to have a whole lot of patience with cider. It still comes back in that way. So let's roll back. Sure.
Is now, you just said a magic word, is now an appropriate time that I might crack a bottle of cider and drink some of it?
Yeah, I'm getting thirsty. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
What do you got there? Tell us about what you're cracking. It's reaching for a bottle.
It is one of my basement ciders. I made a couple years ago. I've poached a label off of the vinegar that we sell here at the farm. But it is our prototype label for our cider, Blackshire Farms. I've got a friend who's an apple breeder. So this is made from essentially, wild apples, just a wide array of apples that he doesn't find valuable to his program. And then open fermented, wild fermented, or spontaneous fermentation, and then oak staves. I want a cider orchard, but I'm in prison and I don't have internet access. I started, so I had my sister-in-law printed me off the availability sheets of a bunch of orchards that had cider trees that seemed like somewhat like you could make a wholesale order. And so I had six orchards, and the first one on my list, because of the availability of their or the variety of trees that they had listed on their site, was Cummins Orchard. So I did what I thought I should do, and I walked over to the phone and I put my money in and I called Cummins Orchard. But the call on their end goes something like this: "This is a call from a federal inmate."
Wow.
And then it tells you that it's a free call, but that you don't have to answer it, blah, blah, blah. And they hung up. So no offense to Cummins Orchard. Without this experience in my life, I might hang up. But you know what? I decided I'm going to try again. So I called again. They hung up. I called again. They hung up. Okay, I've got to come up with a new plan. I think I called a couple other orchards too. They all hung up. I shouldn't have picked out Cummins. So I came up with a new plan. One of the sheets that she sent me had an orchardist, and it was so it was a single person's name, and I was like, okay, this is a real human, not just a company, and it had his address. I'm going to write him a letter. And so I wrote Matt Mosier. He's got an orchard called Grandpa's Orchard. He's a tree distributor. I wrote Matt Mosier a letter, 2-page letter, said, here's my situation. Here's what I'm in for. Here's what I want to do. I need trees. And Matt wrote me back.
Nice.
And it turned out that he was really interested in hearing what I had to say about prison life. And we talked. We talked a bunch. He was like, yeah, I can get you the trees. But we talked and became friends, and we probably wrote each other nearly once a month for a couple of years. I mean, and sometimes it would just be, I would have questions about, tree growing techniques or propagating or what am I going to do here? But eventually he put together an order for me. He, using all of his distribution contacts, was able to, I got to request almost any tree that I wanted, and he found them for me.
Wow. Go Matt.
And yeah, go Matt. And to give Matt one more piece of awesome credit, Matt didn't charge me any money. He didn't mark up any of the trees. He just sold me trees. And so, yeah, that relationship was real special to me.
You survived prison life,
It survived.
Oof, wow, amazing. You have someone who wants to marry you, waiting for you.
We got married.
You got married
on the farm.
Awesome. And you have that 10 acres from the family. You have these orders of trees coming in from Matt. Where are you at right now? Are you a licensed cidery? Is that what's happening here, or what's your plans?
So I ordered 10 acres of trees, but I really only had 2 acres that I could plant on, and I did that with the belief that I would get 10 acres. I asked my neighbors, I talked to everybody, and I was able to convince a neighbor with land contiguous to my land to sell me 10 acres of trees for trees that I had ordered without even land to put it on.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
I was out tilling the ground. My wife went I was supposed to leave the very next day to go to Matt to go to Matt to pick up all those trees. I had the trailer was loaded up, we were ready to go, and then my son was born. My mom goes up and gets the trees for me. She comes back. We plant the trees. The trees are in the ground now. They're 5 years old. I've been making cider with my grandpa's 120-year-old cider press. I've been making a couple hundred gallons a year. Yeah, that's my uncle. In this picture, you can see a 4 or 5 year old Sean catching juice off the catch pan from this 1800s cider press that my grandpa owned, that I went and picked up after I got out of prison, and it's what I'm pressing cider off right now.
So let's show that's a press. That's the exact press from that previous photo.
That is the exact press. This photo is me here pressing down on the press before I start using the pole. But yeah, and if you take the time to go to the RIA's website here and look at the picture, you can see that this thing has been nonstop repaired over its 100 and some years of existence. There is a barrel lid that is operating as a pulley for the motor. Wow. That barrel lid's got to be whatever 50 years old. The hopper for the apples must have busted up at some time, and my grandpa cut apart parts of a grain bin to be the hopper. And then when I got it, the motor was shortened out, so I put a brand new motor on it. It's a hodgepodge of it's a working tool. It's a working tool is what it is. So I've been making a couple hundred gallons of cider every year, and just reminding myself of the process, working out the kinks, being more critical of my product, critical of my process. I've been making wine for a long time, but I've always just been making it for myself, never with the idea to sell it. So I just, I pitch yeast, I ferment it, I drink it. It's always good enough. And trying to treat it as something different than that. Well, anyhow, so right now my orchard is 5 years old. It's just coming into production. I planted semi-standard trees because where we're at in Minnesota, we don't need irrigation. And so it's easier for me to buy more acres and wait than it is for me to plant a $40,000 an acre, fully dwarfed trellis orchard. So that's where I'm at right now. This year, right as we speak, I'm chomping at the bit. I've got a commercial property a mile and a half down the road from me that has a wedding event center and a bar below it, and machine shed, and acres of rolling hills. And we've almost got the deals hammered out. Wow. And waiting on figuring out all the bank financing and everything. But this year, I'm gonna say it into the universe as firmly as ordering trees that there's no land to put on. This year, we are producing cider commercially.
Fantastic. Congratulations for that. Is there any conflict with having a record and then selling alcohol?
When I read the Minnesota statute, it's not exactly clear, but what is clear is that if you're 5 years away from a felony, you're all good. The language makes it unclear whether you need to be 5 years away from an alcohol-related felony or any felony, but it doesn't matter. I'm 5 years away from it. I'm good to go.
Cool. I'm really happy to hear that. Good. So we'll be looking for your product. Your goal is to maybe self-distribute, or just if you could hopefully get this property, which we're going to, when you get this property, I'll speak in.
That's correct. When I get the property.
When you get the property, to have a tasting room and people could come and visit you and go from there. Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, the aforementioned bar I'm going to kind of redesign, and it's going to be my tasting room, and it's an already quasi-functioning event center. It needs a little bit more purpose, a little bit more needs somebody that wants to operate it. But my goal is in the near future to produce cider that I mostly sell on site with some wholesale distribution in the area, and get that machine running real good, and wider distribution, perhaps a later goal. However, one thing that we know about here is that the best cider comes from the best apples, and different than craft beer. If you own a craft brewery and somebody's like, I like your brand, let's get you in Budweiser, you're just like, well, I just need to order more hops, and away you go. And that's not really what we have going on here. So I don't know what the next 15 years are going to look like as far as the availability of apples or what, but who knows, unless I want to, if I want to stay true to my vision of making an aged, bottle conditioned cider from true cider fruit, I see some limit in my ability to grow in the near future.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we're going to be staying in touch, and we'll keep the listeners out there in Ciderville posted on what you're doing. I want to just kind of do one more little segue, because I'm going to put up this photo here of you and your wife and your son in a field of hemp. So you're not in prison here, and you're surrounded by hemp. So what's the story with this photo? And is this cause for alarm, or does this put you at risk or anything? What's going on?
No. Oh my gosh. It is good picture to end with. I don't know if this is the end, but
it's only the beginning. It's only the beginning.
Yeah. Cannabis sativa, it's the species of plant that is both hemp and marijuana. For those people that don't know, it is the same thing. And all cannabis sativa has been illegal for 100 years or whatever. In 2019, the federal government passed a farm bill that included the legalization of hemp. And what they did was they classified hemp as having some slightly different chemical characteristics that of marijuana. But it is for sure the same plant. It would be like if the federal government had a ban on apples, but then made crab apples legal. Right. And they gave it a whole new definition. I absolutely couldn't help myself. I had been out of prison for two years. My son had been born. Gosh, he's cute in that picture too.
He is.
I just oh man, it just didn't feel like something I could pass up. We planted 60 acres of hemp, and I consulted on another several hundred. And I, as much as I wanted to try and make money, nobody made money in hemp. Not the year after they legalized it. When it was illegal, everybody was making money in hemp.
That's right.
But the very year they legalized it, nobody made money in hemp. But the main thing I wanted to do was walk around in a bunch of cannabis and smell like cannabis and have plants in my truck and be 100% federally legal to be walking around in the exact same plant they sent me to prison for.
My goodness. Wow, the irony of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, something has to go on with our judicial system, but that's another story.
I want to answer a question real fast that you asked earlier.
Sure.
And I feel like you asked if I had any advice for anybody that might be going to prison. And I was reminded about this when you said that I had the ability to smile. And I remember thinking while I was in prison that I smiled just as often as I smiled outside of prison, that I laughed as much as I laughed outside of prison, that I cried as much as I cried outside of prison, and that we all live in circumstances from time to time that we have more and less control over, whether it be a military trip to Saudi Arabia or some poverty or something. And yet we all still have the ability to control our own narrative about our own happiness. And that was my goal pre-prison, and then prison made me really have to, prove it, Sean. And it was my goal in prison, and it's my goal outside of prison, that our happiness is not determined by the things we have or the people that treat us well or don't treat us well. But it's our own story that we tell ourselves about our life, and I'm committed to that. Anybody looking at any hardship, prison or otherwise, to just know that your story is your own and you can tell it whichever way you want to.
Yeah, good advice. Manifest your own destiny, and carpe diem, seize the day. What a remarkable journey that you have been on, and it is just beginning on so many levels. The fact that you went through that experience for 3+ years, and then not to mention the 2 years waiting up for that, and that you're able to smile and I could tell live in joy, really speaks to your constitution of who you are. Wish you, your family, the best of luck, and keep us posted on your journey here with Blackshire, because I'm really excited for you. I know that you're going to make it work. You have shown your tenacity, and that's what it takes to be in any kind of business, especially cider and growing apples.
Thank you.
If you found value in this conversation and a little bit more insight on life like I did, well, do consider supporting Cider Chat. It's a listener-supported podcasting. Go to ciderchat.com and hit the donate button, or join and become a patron today at the Cider Chat Patreon page. That's spelled Patreon. And with that, I leave you here. This is Real Wind Caller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider.
Like this. There's a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we drink it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this.
There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we drink it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this.
Yeehaw!